was a Saturday morning. I was around 12 years old at the time. My mom, younger sister, and I were driving home after running a few errands when we saw a sign about a garage sale in the neighboring housing tract pinned to a lamppost. My mom was into that sort of thing, so she said we should go. The sale was taking place at a typical mundane home, indistinguishable from its neighbors, except for the open garage that tempted the bargain hunters. It looked like all the others up and down the street. There was no sign in the yard, but they had a couple of folding tables out on the driveway with some old household appliances and other junk on them. Cardboard boxes contained utensils, a waffle iron, and other kitchen items. It was kinda boring, but I figured I would poke around in case they had something good. A few steps away, I found another table with a dollhouse, an easy-bake oven, and some little girls' clothes. Plus-sized women's clothing were hanging on a rack, shoes neatly lined up underneath it. There was nothing to suggest a man lived there. But sitting on a lawn chair in the back of the garage was a middle-aged man with a big smile on his face. He was maybe in his late 30s or early 40s, balding, with a mustache and gold-wired framed glasses. He was wearing a faded yellow t-shirt and denim cut-off shorts. It was a little weird because he kept crossing and uncrossing his super hairy legs and swinging them in rhythm, even though no music was playing. He looked both out of place and oddly fitting in the junk scattered about. Still, I started poking around in the garage anyway, while my mom and sister were looking through boxes out on the front lawn. That is what boredom will do to you. On the floor was a box of naked Barbies priced at $1 each. I leaned down to inspect them, but they were pretty gross. First, all the Barbies' hair were sticky and crusty, like someone had put glue on them. Second, they smelled terrible, like rotten body odor or something. Just indescribably foul. I stood up and was backing away when the man in the back of the garage started asking me questions like how old I was, where I went to school, and if I liked Barbies. I told him I wasn't really interested. He told me he had more stuff inside if I wanted to see. I told him no thanks and started edging towards the open door. He then started talking about his little Yorkshire Terrier who had been scratching at the garage door to be let out. It was hard to ignore. When he opened the door, the dog started growling and snarling at him. Then, it ran around to the back of the house. By this point, I was finished here. He hadn't really done anything, but he definitely gave me the creeps. "Leaving already?" he asked. He sounded disappointed. I told him I didn't really see anything I wanted, and have a nice day. I walked outside, where my mom and sister were still looking around. I didn't tell her about the dude inside. I just told her the selection in there was crap, and nothing she would like anyway. It was about a week later that we saw a story on the local news about a man in a neighboring housing tract who broke into a woman's house, tied her up, tried on all her clothes, and molested her daughter. He then hosted a garage sale.
It was football playoffs, and I had several of my family over, along with our next-door neighbors, Bob and his wife, Sherry. They don't have a big family, so they used to come over and watch the games with us on the weekends. We ate barbecue in the backyard, and then we all went inside to watch the game except for my daughters, Alyssa and Olivia, who aren't into football. At the time, Olivia was 12 years old, and Alyssa was 15. During halftime, I decided to go up to Olivia's room to get her to come join us. She finally budged and headed down to the living room. After that, my brother-in-law and I went outside with Bob to smoke. Bob's son Brandon came up in conversation. He had been over earlier to eat but had gone home, apparently to be alone and watch movies. I joked to Bob that it was probably porn, and he laughed too. I was casually staring up at one of the windows in my house when I thought I saw someone looking out. The window belonged to Olivia's room, who I could see was standing in the kitchen talking to her mom. Who the hell was that? I thought. Alyssa was now at a friend's house, so it couldn't have been her. I excused myself from the guys and raced inside and up the stairs. Olivia followed me after she saw me hurry by. "Did someone just go into your room?" I asked her. "No. Why?" she replied. I looked around the room, but it was completely empty. I nudged Olivia to go back downstairs while I turned off the lamp. We went back into the living room, where the game would be starting up again any second. But I still couldn't get it out of my head that I saw someone in Olivia's room, so I finally decided to ask. Everyone either said no or shook their heads. Someone, I thought, had to be lying. It wasn't more than a few minutes later that I heard what sounded like footsteps coming from upstairs in Olivia's room. I ran back up again, with Olivia following me. I flipped on the lights in her room and spun around in a circle looking for someone. I bent down to peer under the bed when I noticed the sliding closet door was cracked open a bit. I was staring intently at it when I realized I could see something in there. It was an eye peering back at me. I screamed in shock and surprise and leaped to my feet. My brother-in-law and my wife were just entering the room as I angrily slid open the closet door and pulled out Brandon, Bob's son. Bob ran up and found me basically holding Brandon by the neck. His pants had been pulled down to his knees, and some of Olivia's underwear were in his hands. The incident ruined our relationship with Bob and Sherry. They still live next door, and sometimes I can see Brandon upstairs in his bedroom. He thinks I can't see him watching, but I can. I'm always watching him now. My family used to live in this old 3-story house that was kinda deceptive from the front because of the way it was built into a hill. It looked like it had 2 stories, but surprise, there was a basement level that opened up to the backyard. We moved in right before I started high school, and that's when we met all of our neighbors, including Joshua, the oldest kid from across the street. We never really hung out with him. Being older, he was usually off doing something else somewhere. Our backyard was pretty easy to sneak into due to its size, and our family was kinda lax about locking the basement doors. My sister and I would always run in and out of the house while playing in the backyard, or someone would go down to let our dog out, and we'd forget to lock one of the basement doors before bed. It didn't help that we lived in what everyone thought was a super safe neighborhood, so doors were often left unlocked by habit. Here's where things get creepy. I had a messed up sleep schedule back then, so I was usually up until the wee hours. There were a couple of incidents that happened around 2 or 3 a.m. that still freak me out when I think about them. The first time I was up late, and I heard our dog growling like mad downstairs. It wasn't his usual, "I see a cat" growl, but something more intense. I went down to check, expecting him to be at the front window, but nope. He was at the basement door, hackles raised, nose jammed into the crack at the bottom. That's when I felt it. Something was very wrong on the other side of that door. My heart raced as I tiptoed back upstairs, trying not to make a sound. I woke both my parents, but neither seemed all that concerned. My dad assumed our dog heard some strange noises from outside, but he agreed to check things out. He didn't find anything, and we all went back to bed. The second incident was even more unsettling. Again, it was late, and out of nowhere, our dog let out this booming bark that nearly gave me a heart attack. Thinking it was just another cat sighting, I looked out my window. Instead of a cat, I saw Joshua bolting from our yard. It was pitch black outside, and there he was, running like he'd been caught. I was frozen, watching him disappear into the night, a million questions racing through my mind. After telling my mom about it the next day, she mentioned she'd talked to Joshua's mom, but the whole thing just left me with this sick feeling. A sense of false security began to settle in shortly after the second incident. Nothing strange happened for months, and I figured Joshua had been scared off for good. My parents had gone out for dinner and a concert and left me in charge. I'd stayed up late, watching a horror movie marathon, which in hindsight only amplified what was to come. It was just after 1 a.m. when the power suddenly went out. I assumed it was a neighborhood-wide outage, but I grabbed a flashlight and headed towards the basement to check the circuit breakers, a task I'd seen my dad perform countless times. I reached the basement floor, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. That's when I saw it. The back door was slightly ajar, a cold breeze filling the room. Panic gripped me as I heard a soft, deliberate shuffle from the far corner of the basement. It was the sound of someone trying to move silently. I spun around, the flashlight trembling in my hands, but before I could catch a glimpse of anything, I felt a sudden rush of movement. Fight or flight kicked in, and mine was flight. I raced upstairs, slamming the basement door shut and locking it. I didn't stop there. I went through the house, checking every door and window. Fortunately, the power returned moments later. The next day, the police confirmed my suspicions. Footprints were found outside the basement door and tracked to the curb in the front yard. They disappeared when they got to the street. This finally marked a turning point for our family. We installed a security system and became more vigilant about locking the doors. Looking back, I'm almost sure Joshua had been sneaking into our house in the dead of night. Not just once, but multiple times. Nothing was ever missing. No one really wanted to think deeply about what he was doing in our house all those nights. When I replay it in my mind, I can't shake just how horrifying the whole ordeal was. We don't live there anymore. Over the years, I've heard some more scary stuff about Joshua. It seems a creepy boy became a creepy teenager and eventually into a creepy man. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe.